Welcome everyone to our February meeting of Tuesday Musical Club. I guess this is a real presidential program. I'm introducing and the other two presidents are giving the program. So it's great to see everyone. And now I'll turn the program. Debbie, did you want me to introduce Susan and
Susan? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and introduce Susan and Susie, Susan and Susie or Suzanne. So we have two of our presidents. We have three to split the work who are longtime members. And we also have the author of a book about our past artist concert. So one of the activities for Houston Tuesday Musical Club each year is to invite an artist to give just a recital or concert that everyone comes to. And usually these are people from outside the club. And it turns out that over a history, a lot of these people were either already prominent or about to become very, very famous artists. So Susie and Susan have gone all the way back to the 1920s, the full history of the club. And they are going to talk about all the people we've hosted, and you will recognize many big names. So I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Susan Fischman and Suzanne Marion to carry on with the program.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Roy. When Debbie asked us to talk about the history of Tuesday Musical Club, we both realized immediately that compressing 111 years into 30 or 40 minutes would be impossible, probably unjust, and most of the time head spinning, to say the least. So with all the elements that make up Houston Tuesday Musical Club, our performing members, the chorus, musicals, and above all of our dedicated members, what could we possibly choose? So the answer was the artist concert. So let me take you back instead of 111 years to 11 years ago for the moment. It was the occasion of our 100th birthday celebration. We featured many of our vocal artists, soloists, the entire chorus, and our instrumentalists in a massive concert. Who wasn't on the stage that night is very important to this story. And they were Susie, Marion, and Ann Kiki. And here's why. Each of them produced a treasure on full display that night. For Anne, it was a beautiful bound volume memorializing each artist concert for the entire 100-year history. For Susie, it was a book she authored especially for the celebration. More about those two things later. But both of those were the inspiration for our choice of the artist concert. So the 20th century, which is most of HTMC century, isn't unique in the world history. We had times of peace and of war, times of prosperity and financial insecurity, and times of great achievements, both in science and technology. Throughout it all, HTMC had perseverance. Throughout it all, those in charge had a mission and a vision that music of importance would be brought to a town that wasn't exactly on the A-list of venues for classical music, at least for most of the time. And I do remember the time that anyone of any importance went to Dallas, not to Houston. Yes, we had the Houston Symphony in 1913, thanks to Ms. Ima Hogg. And later in the mid-50s, the Houston Grand Opera and the Houston Ballet. In the meantime, it was HTMC who brought both famous and accomplished artists to the city. When I opened my first yearbook and read the list of the artists that had performed for the club, I must say I was overwhelmed just looking at the names. Although all of them were accomplished artists, many of them are literally titans of the 20th century music. And here's where I invite you at some point, when you have time, to open your yearbook and just look at the list if you haven't for a while. You may already know that when the president of HTMC steps off the podium after 2 years, she or he, Roy, steps up to be producer of the artist concert for the next 2 years. Considering that in those early days with no internet or email, those producers must have spent endless hours on the phone, maybe even sending telegrams to artist agents all over the world. All the more to be in awe of their accomplishments. Susie?
When you look in your yearbook for the names of the artists, if you have a copy of your most recent published yearbook, the artists are listed on 3 pages, starting on page 28. And it is indeed like reading through a who's who of world-class musicians. In the club's centennial year, 2011, Susan Fischman was president for the first time. She organized the above-mentioned gala celebration to celebrate our 100 years. And many of you were there and remember it quite well. In the process of organizing this exciting event, Susan casually asked me to write a history of the club. Since Susan is my friend and I love the club, I rashly said yes. And then I immediately wondered if I had lost my mind. But in the end, it was fun and challenging and definitely informative. I spent many hours in the archives at the downtown library, in addition to the internet, of course. But in the downtown library and the archives, much of our early club history is stored. Actual yearbooks, concert programs, newspaper articles, and more. And the book I wrote based on this research is available on Amazon and is entitled Houston Tuesday Musical Club, Journey Through a Century of Music, 1911 to 2011. Here's what it looks like. By the way, for decades, we were the Tuesday Musical Club. Sometime in the late 1990s, we became the Houston Tuesday Musical Club. There are other Tuesday musical clubs around the United States as well. I cannot help wondering what it was about Tuesday that caused so many to choose that particular day to meet. And I have a copy of the wonderful, well, not a copy, it's the only Ann Kiki's beautiful album. And I hope I can hold it so that you can at least see it a little bit, featuring all the artists that our club has presented from the beginning. I cannot even imagine the hours it took Ann to assemble this, and I have made good use of it while writing my comments for our talk today. Thank you, Ann. Here's the cover, and here's Ann and the title page, and then page after page after page of wonderful information copied from the internet that Ann prepared for us. It's just a great treasure. It's very special. We are the oldest arts organization still in continuous existence in our city. Susie Pearson, with her impeccable memory, recalled that there had been another arts organization founded before ours, sometime in the late 19th century, but that group has not existed for decades. In the second year of our existence, we began to invite outside artists to perform. At that time, Houston was a relatively small city with a dearth of opportunities in the arts. When our first artists came to town, there was wide coverage in the newspapers at the time. It was a big deal. In the archives are newspaper photos of artists arriving by train and being met by our president and other members. It was very interesting. It's another era. In recent memory, our artist concerts have presented many fine artists that are well known to us all, including Gail Martin, her sister Mayola Martin, Albert Hirsch, Richard Dowling, Zoya Shukatovich, the Fisher duo who taught at Rice, the Jaber family, Adam Golka, Janelle Sugars, and many more. From 1912 until 1942, our club presented 2 artist concerts each year, which was very impressive. And then from 1942 on, there were 3 each season until 1990. Then from then on, we sponsored just 1 each year as our city grew and became more and more a center for world-class entertainment.
Susie and I have chosen a few videos as examples of some of the past artists who are now part of the history of classical music in the 20th century. Some of them are quite old, and I thank Debbie ahead of time for helping us with this. So Susie, if you'll introduce our first artist, Olga Samarov.
Yes, Olga Samarov, and I chose her for dual reasons. One is that we wanted to start early, and she was the third artist presented by Tuesday Musical Club in 1915. And another reason for choosing Ms. Samarov was, you may laugh, but she was born Lucy Mary Agnes Hickenlooper in San Antonio, Texas. So probably after trying to imagine that name on a concert program, Ms. Hickenlooper later was persuaded to adopt a name much more exotic and sophisticated. And thus, she became Olga Samarov and enjoyed a very successful career. She was born August 8th, 1880, and died in New York City, May 17th, 1948. She grew up in Galveston, Texas, where her family owned a business which was later wiped out in the Great Hurricane of 1900. When her talent for the piano became apparent very early, she was sent first to Paris and then to Berlin to study with well-known teachers there. She married briefly a Russian engineer, divorced, and then returned to the USA to establish a career. It was at that time that she made her name change. In 1905, she became the first woman to make a debut in Carnegie Hall. After a great success at her performance there of the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto, the internet does not say which one, but I'm presuming it's #1 probably. She began to tour extensively in the USA and in Europe. She met Leopold Stokowski when he was church organist at St. Bartholomew's in New York. At that time, she was much better known than he, and through her contacts, she helped him launch his international career. They married in 1911, and their daughter Sonia was born in 1921. In 1923, Stokowski left Olga for Greta Garbo, creating a scandal that made headlines. In 1925, she suffered a shoulder injury in a fall and was forced to retire from performing. But from then on, she worked as a critic, lecturer, and teacher. She taught at Juilliard and at the Philadelphia Conservatory. Among her many notable students were William Capel, Rosalind Turek, and Vincent Persichetti. And now we will hear an excerpt of her playing.
She was a magnificent presence.
She went right to the heart of the matter.
She had a beautiful sound.
She didn't have to bow to anybody. I mean, she'd had a major concert career.
She was a living example of how a woman could make it.
Madam was a sort of Eleanor Roosevelt of music.
I learned from her what it meant to be an artist.
As a concert pianist, I was on the stage myself. As the wife of the orchestra conductor Leopold Stokowski, I was an observer at close range behind the scenes.
She was actually born Lucy Hickenlooper.
She had to adopt this Russian name, Samarov, from somewhere.
I think there was an inferiority complex in both America and in Europe for American musicians.
That changed, and Mother was one of the ones that changed it.
On the evening of January 18th, 1905, Olga has her American debut in Carnegie Hall.
Madame Samarov's hiring of a hall probably was, for a woman, it was something really out of the ordinary.
During all the years of my career as a woman pianist, when the critic said I played like a woman, it meant that he did not like me at all.
Stokowski was a man who wooed you by seduction in music. And I don't think he was capable of deep love.
The New York Evening Post offer her a position as the first woman music critic of the paper.
Her prestige was enormous. Everybody thought that she was the very top teacher, and every student felt extremely privileged to be there.
Her years at Juilliard allow her to impart her broad training to generations of exceptionally talented American musicians.
What a forward-thinking person Madame was, to think that here she was producing these artists, but where was the audience for them? You know, she was worrying about the whole picture.
She had the vision to see how important the general public's appreciation of music was.
Brilliant lecturer.
On one of her radio programs, that she had pianists play behind screens.
92% of the listeners thought I was a man. That just tickled her to death.
Don't you just love the fact that they refer to her as Madame Samaroff when that was a made-up name to begin with? I find that really interesting. The next artist we chose was Ernst von Dohnanyi. By the time Ernst von Dohnanyi performed for the club in 1924, he was already an established pianist and composer in Hungary. During the 1898 season, he made his American debut with the St. Louis Symphony, performing the Beethoven Piano Concerto No. 4, and was hailed then as the most famous pianist of his time. When he returned to Budapest, he traveled to Berlin and taught for a few years there at the Hochschule, and then was appointed music director of the Budapest Philharmonic Orchestra in 1920. When you think what a triumph it was for the club that we brought such a distinguished artist from so far away in 1924, it's just amazing. This video that I chose, it's quite old. Debbie and I were talking, it reminds me of some of the features that were shown in the movie theaters before the main feature. And there is some foreign language in there as well. But this video highlights just some of his accomplishments.
került, úgyhogy el is kellett hagynia a Zeneakadémiát. De aztán 1928-tól kezdve ismét tanított, akkor már a mesteriskolát vezette, és 1934-ben ennek az intézménynek, a Zeneakadémiának az igazgatója lett, egészen 1943-ig, amikor is az akkori politikai viszonyok miatt egyet nem értve a zsidó törvénnyel és egyéb megkülönböztetésekkel Dohnanyi lemondott a Zeneakadémia elnökségéről, igazgatásáról.
Ez rendben van, csinálja csak innen.
Érdekes az is, hogy a pályafutását
Dohnanyi Ernő 66. születésnapján a rádióban a mester vezérletével Dohnanyi estet rendeztek.
As I said, it's quite promotional for Maestro Dohnanyi, but he not only was a very fine pianist and composer, but quite the conductor as well. The next artist that we chose is Myra Hess. When Myra Hess performed for the club in 1932, she was already considered one of Great Britain's most famous classical pianists. She always said she was happier performing in small halls rather than large venues, and that may be why she chose to accept the club's invitation. However, within a few years of her performance here, World War II broke out, and it resulted in London's National Gallery being closed, and its paintings were safely stored in a location outside of the capital. The concert halls were dark, the cinemas were dark. So Miss Hess was concerned about the effect that this would have on the lives of Londoners. So in September 1939, she approached the director of the gallery with the idea of holding lunchtime classical concerts. Sound familiar? By October, the first concert was staged, which was a resounding success. Those continued all through the war until April of 1946. Over 1,600 concerts were held, on which Miss Hess performed 150 of them. So she overcame her fear, I guess, of the larger venue and played in the National Gallery regardless. She was conferred a commander of the British Empire in 1936 for her artistry. And then King George VI conferred the honor of Dame of the British Empire in 1941 for her work in uplifting the spirits of Londoners during the war. So here's a video of Dame Myra Hess later in her career.
In 1935, our artist was pianist Dalys France. He was born in Lafayette, Colorado on January 9th, 1908. He grew up in Denver and became known as a child prodigy. After earning music degrees in the USA, he studied in Europe with Arthur Schnabel and Vladimir Horowitz. His debut with the Philadelphia Orchestra under Leopold Stokowski led to a long and brilliant career, giving recitals and as soloist with most of the major orchestras in our country. He worked in Hollywood in several motion pictures. His photos show that he was a very handsome man. I believe, in addition, perhaps to some acting, he also did some music. I don't have details on that, but that was the impression I got from what I read. He served in World War II as an intelligence officer, and due to health problems, he was given a medical discharge before the end of the war. He joined the University of Texas music faculty in 1943, where he taught until his death in 1965. He inspired many pianists to pursue careers in music. The best known to me, and one of my reasons to highlight this fine artist, was that he was the teacher of James Dick, who was famous as the founder in 1971 of the Festival Institute in Round Top. And I have read that James Dick founded the festival on the advice of Miss Ima Hogg. So there was a connection with the very inception of our club. This is the only artist that we chose today for whom we were not able to find any recordings. So sorry about that, but I'm sure he was incredible, but he didn't leave a body of work for us to hear. In 1944, our artist was Leonard Warren, who is probably familiar to most of you. Leonard Warren was born Leonard Warrenoff in New York City in 1911, the son of poor Russian Jewish immigrants. He is widely considered to have possessed one of the finest operatic voices of all time. He began his career at the Metropolitan Opera and performed in all the major opera houses of the world. He was particularly noted for his work in Verdi and Puccini operas. He was a baritone, but his voice had a very high and very wide range, I should say. Sadly, he met a dramatic and untimely death at the age of only 48, right at the pinnacle of his career. In the third act of Verdi's La Forza del Destino at the Metropolitan Opera, he had just finished singing Don Carlo's aria, which begins with the words, morir, tremenda cosa, to die, a momentous thing, when he fell face forward onto the stage, dead of a cerebral hemorrhage. It is said that this tragic event caused some singers, including Luciano Pavarotti, to avoid this role in future. And now we have a lovely recording for you.
In the second act of Georges Bizet's opera, Carmen, Escamillo, a famous bullfighter, emerges victorious from the bull ring and is hailed as a hero by the crowd. He describes his encounter with the bull and reenacts the fight for them in the famous aria which Leonard Warren sings next, the Toreador song.
Seigneur, Seigneur, car avec les soldats, où est le torero, de s'entendre, pour plaisir au Brésil, ils ont le combat. Le cirque est plein ces jours de fête, et cirque est plein d'idiots. Les spectateurs se perdent la tête, les spectateurs s'interpellent à la fracas. Brisez sa page, vous poussez jusqu'à la fureur. Ah, c'est la fête du courage. fête des gens de terre. Allons, en garde, allons, allons. Toréador, en garde, toréador, toréador. Sont de bien, oui, sont à bon battant, que le noir te regarde, et de l'amour t'attend, toréador, l'amour, l'amour t'attend. Silence, on fait silence, que se passe-t-il? Plus de cris s'élançant, plus de cris s'élançant, c'est l'ensemble des auditories. Il s'élance, il en prit preuve, cheval roule, imprenant à picador. Un brave taureau, il donne à foudre, c'est bien, frappe encore, c'est quoi, c'est banderie, plein de filet discours, le cirque est plein de sang, on se sauve, on franchit les grilles, c'est tout pour maintenant, allons, en garde, allons, allons.
Oh, I would have loved to have heard him in person. That was fabulous. The next artist that I chose was Menachem Pressler. Menachem Pressler performed for the club in 1947, 1 year after winning first prize in the Debussy International Piano Competition in San Francisco. And only 8 years previously, he and his family had fled Nazi Germany, first to Italy and then to what was then Palestine. By the time of the artist concert, he was a mere 24 years old. Flash forward to 2019, I had the immense pleasure of actually seeing and hearing Maestro Pressler perform at the Liszt Academy in Budapest. He was then 94 years old and quite the artist, performing in solo recital, complete with several encores. Not only was Maestro Pressler the consummate soloist, he was also a renowned chamber player. In 1955, he debuted as the pianist with the Beaux Arts Trio and was the only pianist with them for 55 years. In 1961, the Beaux Arts Trio, again with Maestro Pressler, was the club's choice for the artist concert. By the way, coming full circle, Maestro Pressler made his debut with the Berlin Philharmonic at the age of 90. This is a video quite late in his career. In the 2005-2006 season, our artist was Frederica von Stade. I believe I'm correct, Barbara Buckner. I believe you were the artist concert chair that year, if I'm not mistaken. Frederica von Stade, known as Flicke, accompanied by pianist Richard Bedo, fills Duty Hall at Rice University for our HTMC artist concert. She was born in 1945 in Somerville, New Jersey, and became one of the most accomplished and sought-after classical singers of her time. She received a contract from Sir Rudolph Bing during the Metropolitan Opera auditions, and since her debut in 1970, she has sung nearly all her great roles with that company. She has appeared with every leading American opera company and has worked regularly with the finest conductors and with the world's leading orchestras. She has made over 70 recordings with every major label, including operas, art songs, symphonic works, and popular crossover works. A vignette that I found online, which was very poignant to me to share, which I wish to share with you. American composer Richard Danielpour composed in 1998 Elegies, a work scored for orchestra, mezzo-soprano, and baritone. It is a tribute to Miss von Stade's father, Charles von Stade, who was killed in the final days of World War II.
and is based on the text of letters Mr. von Stade sent to his wife during the war. Through these letters, Miss von Stade came to know her father, who was killed 2 months before her birth. The selection we're going to hear, I was very fortunate to have the chance to hear her do this in person years ago. So.
So now that you've indulged us in nostalgia, the question in my mind is, what may we learn from these glory days of the early 20th century? We know these productions went on no matter what. Through uncertain times, they still happened. And what we learned in the last 2 years of uncertainty is we continue to have the same perseverance to carry on. When the artist concert had to be on hiatus, the music went on thanks to Debbie and to Gail. Looking to the past, we have much to be proud of. Looking to the future, we have much to look forward to. And I might add at this point, and we are so grateful to you for spending, I can't even imagine how much time and effort to produce that history for us. My intention is, at the first opportunity when we meet in person is to have that book on display so everyone can enjoy it. Would you like to just say something to us, Anne?
I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to these videos. It just brings the book to life.
Indeed.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you all for doing all the research. And I hope we can hang on to those videos and maybe include them with the book somehow. I don't know. But thank you both for putting this on. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Anne, for doing what you did for us too. So Susie, final thoughts?
I just, what you said, so grateful to Anne and so grateful to Gail and Debbie. Our HTMC has weathered so many difficult times over the more than a century, but thanks to the dedication of absolutely countless people, we're still here. We have been able to stay afloat when meeting in person has not been an option for the first time in over a century. We have persevered through wars, more than one pandemic, and very trying economic times. We have evolved to adapt to changing conditions. These conditions, many of which could never have been imagined in 1911 when that little group of music-loving women founded our club. So here's to a bright future for our beloved organization, and thank you to everyone today who has joined us on our journey into the past.
My sentiments exactly. Thank you so much for coming. Susie and I enjoyed doing this so much. And really we didn't begin to explore the number of artists, but thanks to YouTube, you can do that. Pick your favorite artist and enjoy it. We certainly did.